I hung around and ended up playing with a lot of people.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching. I'm very excited because with me is Tim Pierce, super talented and prolific guitarist based in Los Angeles. Hi, Tim. How are you?
Hey, how are you? I'm good. Good to be here.
So Tim has toured the world with artists, but he's probably best known as a session guitarist. You've probably played on thousands of recordings, right? Over 1,000 recordings?
That's what the allmusic.com website has, and I encourage you to click on it and look at it if you want. I just forget, I hung around and ended up playing with a lot of people, basically.
Okay, I wrote a couple down. Indulge me here. Rod Stewart, Kelly Clarkson, Roger Waters, Selena Gomez, Smokey Robinson, Lana Del Rey, Michael Jackson, Elton John. So it runs the gamut of major artists, but also eras and genres. I mean, as a session musician, you have to be ready for a lot of different things, no?
It's true. Versatility is everything. And you walk in and you read the room and you try and give them what they need at that particular time, which could be the exact opposite of what the person needed the day before.
Right. You got to serve the song and serve a producer or an artist and whatever their whims might be, I imagine, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's a job.
So beyond session work, you have an online masterclass where you've got tons of guitar lessons and videos and transcriptions and backing tracks, right?
Yeah, I pivoted to having a subscription website for guitar players. I started 10 years ago, and we built it up really strong. The pandemic was actually a boon for it. I just wanted a plan B, and it's become more of a plan A because it's a really good business. I have about 5,000 members and one full-time employee, 3 part-time employees. I have a great team, and it's very it takes a lot of time to do all the little bits. It's a lot of work, but I love it. I do.
Seems like a lot. I mean, in my mind, your career may be arced in this way, right? A gigging musician, a touring musician, into session work, and now into the YouTube work that you do, which is really captivating, into this masterclass. Is that an accurate kind of description of how your career arc went? And were you expecting that?
Well, I loved being a studio musician, but at a certain point, you would age out no matter what, even if the business hadn't changed. I was super busy from 1990 to 2000. Wow, let's see, 2020, really, even. I had a longer session career than most people, and I still do sessions, but I limit it to family and friends at this point because the other business is my focus, and the other business scales. The thing about session work is that you have to be there for every hour of work. Well, what I offer now is actually a product rather than a service. So people are buying the subscription and buying the collection of videos, and I do the work and I keep it going and I add to it, but I don't have to be there every hour. But I loved being a studio musician, and like I said, even if you were in a business that hadn't changed, you would still age out at a certain point. So the great thing about this new business for me is I didn't expect it to do so well, and I really feel grateful and lucky. But any studio musician, you're going to have 10 years, 20 years, 30 years of strong work, and then it's going to change. So I was sensing that change about 10 years ago, and I decided to lean into it rather than the alternative.
Well, look, I think a lot of it, and I've only done a small amount of session work myself, but a lot of it is relationships with producers, right? So if the producers aren't necessarily around anymore or working anymore, that's going to affect, whose phone number, who's got your phone number too.
Yes, absolutely. So I can define that a little more clearly for you. At a certain point in the music business, it was producers, but as the music business began to change, it could be anybody. It could be the artist, the producer, the composer, the engineer. It could be the parents of a kid who wants to have a career. So it could, but it is relationships. You're absolutely right about that. And you foster those relationships and you keep them in place and you try and be the only person that they call. My goal was always to not be a guitar player on a list, but be the only guitar player they wanted to call. So I would foster relationships where I would be there 100% of the time for the people who called, and I wanted them to call me rather than just call a guitar player. And any musician is like that. You want them to think of you only when they make the call. So that's the goal. And the other thing that happened is that because of technology, you didn't have to necessarily be a great and versatile musician in order to get the parts done. So what can happen now is if you play some guitar, you put the part down, you can fix it, cut it, and paste it. So the specialist, the person that had to deliver all the sounds and parts on demand, quickly, instantly, that is not necessary so much anymore. Then lastly, I'll say this. If you're somebody like Bruno Mars and you're doing a record, it's 11 p.m., you're in the studio, you just text two or three guys who are on your phone, who are your guitar buddies, and
Yeah.
whoever's around comes and does the session at midnight, and then they go home. It's not that big of a deal anymore, and you don't have to be a studio specialist. You know,
Yeah.
it's not reserved for these specialists in this rarefied air like it was.
And with the advent of digital, which is going back a ways, but I mean, you know, you don't have to throw 2-inch tapes up on the reel anymore, and anybody can kind of record anytime or email, you know, send files through the cloud or whatever. It makes
Right.
it a lot easier for that person to deliver something to a Bruno Mars or somebody. But I want to talk to you about a song that we released in our music service, KORD, here, that you played on. But if we could go back a little, if you don't mind, I'm really kind of curious about your early music experiences. Were there musicians in your family? How did you kind of find music?
No, the thing about music for me is it came exclusively from my love of top 40 radio in the 60s. I was born in 1958, and by the time I was 3 years old, 4 years old, I began to fall in love with the magic of songs I was hearing on the radio. And that was everybody from Petula Clark to Peter, Paul and Mary to Otis Redding to B.B. King to the Beatles, on and on and
Right.
on. I mean, radio, it was so eclectic and so amazing back then. No one in my family was musical, but in Albuquerque, New Mexico, there was a lot of music going on locally, a lot of live bands, a lot of musicians around. It was a very, I mean, Woodstock happened when I was 10 years old, I believe, or 12 years old. Anyway,
Yeah.
Hendrix appeared when I was 9 years old. So
Yeah.
it was just the greatest time for this explosion of creativity and music. And there were a lot of bands and a lot of, you know, I was playing in bands by the time I was 14, and
Mm.
the musicians were older than me. So it was a wonderful desert bohemian musical environment in New Mexico. So that's where
Yeah.
it all came from.
And the touring artists kind of came through down there as well, like
Totally,
they did everywhere.
totally,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I saw a lot of my heroes. Led
Yeah.
Zeppelin, you know, I just
Nice.
on and on and on. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna ask you was, you know, a lot of us have these kind of musical moments when we're, and people who are a little older, you know, they had Elvis on Ed Sullivan or they had the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. But it sounds to me like yours might have been when you first heard Are You Experienced or something. Was that, would you say, like one of those catalyst moments where you're
It
like, oh my
was.
God, guitar is what I need to do?
It was exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not unique in that, but Hendrix was
Nope.
the life-changing moment for me that where I decided, you know, I just have to do this. And then, you know, then it was Clapton and then Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top and everybody. But
Yeah.
Hendrix more than anyone, that was the otherworldly magical moment when guitar
Yeah. Yeah.
took over my life. Yeah.
That changed the universe. And imagine if he had more than, you know, 3 years essentially in the spotlight is all he had, if that. You know, it's
True.
pretty unbelievable, the impact.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what about your first guitar? Do you remember that first guitar you had?
It was a Sears guitar, which was a harmony, which was a K, and then I
I got one right
mowed
there.
lawns. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, it's something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And then I mowed some lawns and bought a used Stratocaster after that.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. So you said you were in bands growing up, cover tunes and things like that. Were you writing music?
The bands I was in, of course, we did covers because that's how you did gigs, and we wanted to
Yeah.
play the Stone songs and Hendrix songs, and then later Steely Dan songs. But the
Yeah.
bands I was in also wanted to write original music. We all had the dream of that. So I started writing when I was 14. I wrote a lot, and I wrote songs even when I was a successful studio musician. I even wrote songs in the 80s and early 90s. But at a certain point, I decided to give it up because I was working literally with the best songwriters in the world. And it really happened. When I gave up songwriting, my career actually did a lot better because I wasn't distracted by trying to write this perfect song all the time. And I
Right.
just concentrated on being a session musician and let the greatest people that in the world that I was in the rooms with write the songs. That being said, I did have some covers. I made some money from songs. I had a record. I was in Rick Springfield's band, and I wrote a song with him. Wrote two songs with him. I had a hit with a country artist in Nashville. I had another, a French artist. So some of the songs I did got covered and earned money, but
Oh,
it was
nice.
just it was one of those things. It sounds counterintuitive, but when I gave up songwriting, my life and my career and everything got a lot better.
Look, I'm going to imagine that having those experiences, putting pen to paper and coming up with chords and everything, gives you the sensibility that you need to be a session musician, right? Because any session musician, the goal in that room, I believe, is to serve a song or serve lyrics, right? Or to support vocalists and things like that. So if you have some idea of what it takes to write a song and craft a song, then maybe you understand the kind of importance there that as a session musician, you need to support that song and serve that song, right?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, it all works together, and it all informs everything else. And yes,
Yeah.
it does help. Absolutely.
So how did you first break into session work? Was that a goal that you had, or you kind of fell into it, or what happened?
Well, I moved here, and it was a really great time for music because LA was a big campus of, just organic music, people with careers and buildings full of publishers and
Yeah.
demos. And so it was very easy when I moved here in 1980 to start working. And I started doing records right away. I was good enough to start working right away, I wasn't that good. So it was kind of like on the job training. So I started doing records, and then I got here at age 21, and then at age 23, I had a couple of nice things happen. I did a John Waite record in New York with Neil Giraldo. I did Rick Springfield's second record. And then I did a Bon Jovi record, his first single, which was Runaway. And those three things kind of all happened at the same time. And then I joined Rick's band and toured the world with him for like 4 or 5 years. So it was nice. I got a real foothold 2 years after I moved here and started doing records and touring.
So touring with Rick, right? That's his heyday. That's Jesse's Girl. That's. I mean, you guys playing? It's an arena tour. Is that? Did it ever
Yeah,
get
the
to
biggest
stadiums?
we did Live Aid, we did arenas and stadiums and sheds and theaters.
Live Aid must have been a wow moment for you, huh? I mean, the people who are milling about. I mean, it must have been. It had to be something, man. Wow.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
absolutely amazing.
When you came to LA, was it? I mean, did you run across Steve Lukather? Did you run across Larry Carlton?
I did.
I mean, it must have been intimidating at being a 21-year-old and run into those guys, or think that I got to do this kind of thing, or did you
Well,
feel
I did.
comfortable?
Yeah, I did a record with Steve Lukather when I first got here, and so I got to watch his talent. And when you're in the room with somebody, you realize they're not only 10 times better than you are, but they're 100 times better than you are.
Right.
So yeah. Carlton had already finished his session career. He was an artist, so he wasn't milling
Gotcha.
around. He was doing his own thing. But
Right.
Lukather was busy, and Michael Landau was busy, and then later Dan Huff showed up and got really, really busy. So I was never quite as capable as these guys, but I was capable enough, and I had a kind of particular style that people felt was really genuine. And
Yeah.
they felt like rather than reaching down to the music that I was capable of doing, I was giving it my all, which was true. I mean, it was one of the things. It sounded, when I played a simple part, it sounded like it meant life or death to me, and that I had wrote it and that I owned it. That I played from the heart, and my simplicity, my simple approach was actually valued. And then when Nirvana showed up and kind of wiped away the prior era of, hair bands and rock stars, then that's when my career really kicked into overdrive, because I could be that guy. I could be the reliable studio musician who could get any sound quickly, but I also could sound like I was a band guy. So my career really took off
Right.
when Nirvana and that era started.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would almost, I would have believed you if you said that came around and, and that kind of hurt what we were doing. But since you had that skill set, or you could morph into that skill set, and I'm going to assume that you enjoyed that music and felt passionate about it, so
Yeah.
that when you're playing it, you're not faking it, so to speak. Right?
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
because there is passion, obviously, in that music, the music that came out at that time.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting what you say, because I mean, as a guitar player myself, and I've watched your channel, I feel that not only are you so relaxed in there, it's an almost a folksy style that you have, but you're always smiling, and I feel like that big smile is legit. It's real. I mean, are you as happy as you appear to be when you're playing guitar? Because you seem really happy.
I am. Yes, yeah. It's real. Yeah.
Because I mean, I know it's your job, but it's also got to feel pretty good that you're inspiring this kind of next generation of guitarists. I mean, we're coming.
It does. It does. Yeah, it does, and it is real, and I'm very grateful. Absolutely.
Great. So moving on to this song. So the song is Crowded House's 1985 song, "Don't Dream It's Over," right? And then you were called to play guitar on this. How'd you get that call?
I was friends with another musician who worked with Rick Springfield, but only on the records. A really brilliant guy named Mitchell Froome. And Mitchell was starting to produce, but he would do all of Rick's records as a sound spec. He was kind of the Thomas Dolby of Rick's crew. Right. A really, really, unique keyboard arranger. Mitchell was producing Crowded House. And so he called me and he said, "Hey, I've got these guys coming from Australia. I'd like you to join this project. It's going to be about 6 weeks, and we're going to rehearse, and then we'll record. And I don't know what Neil's capability on guitar is. We'll find out, but I need you to kind of be the ringer and play guitar on this thing." And it was super fun. The guys got here and they were really funny and hilarious and nice, and they embraced me. So I rehearsed with the band, I think for maybe a week or so, and we went through all the songs. I even have one of those rehearsal tapes. It's in the video that I did, which you can reference. But it was basic, it's very much Neil Finn's baby. And then Paul Hester was the drummer, Nick Seymour is the bass player, and Paul was a natural comedian. So the entire time, everybody was laughing. And so we went into Capitol to do the tracking in the basement, the famous, I think it was Studio B. And what you hear on the record is, for the most part, tracked live at Capitol Records. And then we moved over to Sunset Sound, and Neil began to take over the guitar duties. And I exited a little bit early because he was much better as a guitar player, and specifically overdubbing, where he could, take chances and make mistakes and try stuff more than once. He was able to finish the record playing guitar himself. And then after that, he did all the guitars.
So on this particular song, it starts with guitar, right? It sounds like a Strat or something with some reverb. And I don't know if that's the big chambers in the basement of Capitol or not. That would be pretty cool if it is. But
I'm sure they are. Yeah, I'm sure they are.
I assume that was you playing that. Were you playing it during the rehearsals?
No. That's Neil. That's Neil.
Sounds great. I mean, he's a capable guitarist, obviously.
Well, that's what he wrote. That part is what he wrote. And I'm playing the ambient. I'm playing all the ambient answer fills on that song.
During the rehearsals, was he playing that original opening guitar? Okay, so he was always playing that. Yeah, very interesting.
It's on his demo also, and that's his gold top. It's a particular guitar. It's a gold top with mini humbucker pickups, and they did everything on his sound with a Vox. I used probably a Vox and a Matchless for my sound. I used my Tom Anderson Stratocaster and basically had a vibrato bar, and so I did all these, you can hear it, it's all these dreamy ambient kind of answers, and it was all live.
you guys tracked live.
Yeah.
And then Mitchell takes I mean, it sounds a little bit like a Whiter Shade of Pale almost, that organ solo that he takes. Yeah, I mean, it's a nice, beautiful, atmospheric track. And I imagine that's kind of the life of the session musician too. So what can I add that kind of adds to this gumbo, let's say, and doesn't get in the way? Because he, like we said, he already had, not that your parts weren't needed, but it's a good song without any of the ambient guitars. He's got a nice bed of guitar going there already. Yeah. And you're hitting that whammy bar, like you said.
It's nice answers and ambience, which what you do as a studio musician is you give everybody space and you orchestrate, basically. It's orchestration,
Yeah. Now, so nobody knew who Crowded House, but you probably knew who Split Enz were, right? Which is the band that he came out of, that his brother founded, that Neil came out of. But nobody knew Crowded House yet. This is their debut album, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did you have a feeling being in there? And you said you left early. I mean, is this another day at the office, or did you have a feeling, or like, I think this is gonna, I mean, no one could know that this song would be, decades later, really important in people's lives, which just kind of, I didn't realize at the time even, but now I'm listening to it all these years later, and I'm like, wow, I can see why this song really touched people and resonates through time. It's a timeless song. Did you have any idea of that as a session musician?
I did not. There are certain artists you work with. Like when I played on Michael Jackson's Black or White, I was pretty sure that would be a #1 single.
Yeah.
But generally, you never want to jinx it by assuming something is going to be successful. It's always better to be nicely surprised when something breaks through.
Right, right.
So that particular song for me really boosted my career because every songwriter in LA, that was their favorite song because it's intelligent, it's unique, the lyrics are great. It was a piece of art that basically broke through in a major way. So every songwriter in LA, I mean, when they found out that I played on that, it just created endless work for me for years afterwards.
Oh, interesting. I was going to ask you that. Thing.
But the actual record came out a year before that song. That was the second single. The record came out and died before Don't Dream It's Over came out. So they released a single called Something So Strong, and nothing happened. And then the record sat there for a year. But the great thing about that era is that record companies actually took a second swing, or even a third swing at artists, pushing artists. So they swung around a second time, and Don't Dream It's Over was a hit. And they brought it back to life. So it was fantastic. Fantastic.
So it comes on the radio, and which has probably happened many times in your career, you'd probably almost forgotten about it. You're like, wow, there it is. And here it
goes. Yeah. So it is another day at the office because you in my particular case, everybody was as important as everybody else. Yeah. And it didn't matter if the person was famous or not or anything. I was investing, I treated everybody as equals. So I was just on to the next thing right after that.
So it struck me that, you're making these YouTube videos, you're doing your master class, but the skill set that you built up over all this time, being in the studio, even if things are written on the page and you got a chart and you got to read it, there's a level of improvisation and being ready for anything in the studio. Do you feel like that's kind of carried over to your YouTube?
Absolutely,
because you feel very relaxed in there,
Well, the thing I wanted to tell you, because you've mentioned it a couple of times. So in my particular case, and a lot of my colleagues' case, I wasn't a reader. I could read chord charts and I could memorize. I could see a melody and maybe memorize it. But representing yourself as a reader in LA, you either do it or you don't, because you have to be able to sight read if you call yourself a reader, and that generally is most important in television and film. They just read through stuff. But I wasn't a reader, and because of that, I wrote almost 100% of my guitar parts. So it was very creative, and you're asked to actually write everything you come up with, and you
Yeah.
do it in, people help sometimes. They might suggest something, a style, a sound, or whatever. They help you shape it. But yes, it's 100% improvisational, and it always was.
Yeah.
And it's I feel great about that. It's a job where they actually called you to come in and do your thing and your
Sure.
ideas, and
Yeah,
everybody collaborates and shapes it together, but it's your thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it has helped. It allows you to, you're very comfortable with doing whatever it takes to, self start. And
Well, even just pressing record in general can make people freeze up, right? So you're going to sit down, I'm going to make this profound YouTube video, and I got an idea, and I got a kind of a story that I'm going to go through here, but then you press record and it doesn't work. But you've had record pressed for you so many times in your life. I imagine you're just ready to go. All right, Tim. Well, look, thanks so much for your time. I really love talking to you, and I hope we get to talk some more.
let's do it again. Absolutely.